Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Raji Chakrabarty, a senior economist in the research group of the New York Fed. Today, we are excited to welcome you to our webinar on demystifying a career path in economics and advancing diversity. This is for college students and professors nationwide. This webinar will provide information and tips for success in the field of economics, information on economics careers in the broader workplace, and opportunities at the New York Fed. You will also hear about the Federal Reserve System and about the research group of the New York Fed, including what the economists and RAs have been working on most recently. Importantly, we are here to answer your questions, and there will be plenty of opportunities to ask questions throughout the webinar. You can either use the chat feature or the raise hand feature. If you use the raise hand feature, we will call on you and you will be unmuted to share the question. Alternatively, simply type in your question in the chat. Please note that this event is being recorded. At the end of the webinar, you will see an exit poll. We strongly encourage you to fill the survey out. It should not take more than 3 to 4 minutes of your time. It will help us gauge what is most useful for you so we can tailor our future webinars accordingly. Additionally, during the webinar, you will see some quick polls which we hope you will find interesting and fun. Today, you will hear from representatives from the research group, from our Outreach and Education Office, as well as from the People and Engagement Office. You can see the participants' pictures on the top of this slide, and you will see their pictures throughout the deck, actually. From the research group, you will hear from Bev Hartle, our Director of Research, as well as from multiple economists and RAs. Among economists, you will hear from Bev. Bev is a research director, but also an economist. Daniel, Nina, Jason, and myself. Among RAs, you will hear from David Dam and Svetlana Galvez-Stoysovich. Additionally, you will hear from Heather Daly, Economic Education Manager in the Outreach and Education Group, and also on the panel is Graham Long, Economic Education Manager, also from the same group. Finally, we'll hear from Tori Scarborough, Senior Recruiter from our People and Engagement Group. So the standard disclaimer applies for everybody here. The views we express here are ours and do not necessarily reflect those of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York or the Federal Reserve System. Now let's move on to the agenda. In terms of agenda, after this, you will hear next an overview of the Federal Reserve. This will be followed by presentations on careers in economics and an overview of the research group at the New York Fed. This will be followed by a panel discussions with economists and RAs. And finally, you will hear about the internship and full-time RA positions, diversity at the bank, and ways to stay connected. With that, I will pass on to Heather Daly, who will talk about the Federal Reserve. Heather, take it away.
Thank you, Raji. And welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Again, my name is Heather Daly. I'm the Director of Education Programs at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and with the Economic Education team. And we're so excited to talk with you all today. My role is to talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and also the Federal Reserve System in general, just to provide a little bit of an overview and introduction for anyone who may not be quite as familiar with some of the details and things that we do. So everyone that you hear from today is with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, or as you hear, we often refer to ourselves as the New York Fed. And our mission statement and vision are here to let you all know a little bit about what we're all working for and why we choose to work at the New York Fed. And one thing I want to stress here is really just to read out the first part of our mission. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York makes the U.S. economy stronger and the financial system more stable for all segments of society. And I'll talk a little bit more as we go through the slides on sort of our role within the Federal Reserve System, what's a bit unique about what we do. But I do want to emphasize that if you have an interest in this public service mission, if you're interested in working in sort of these big ideas, big areas that really matter to the United States economy and the people of the United States, we hope that this will really resonate with you today in terms of learning more about us and the work that we do. So what is the Fed, right? The Federal Reserve System. We're part of the Federal Reserve System at the New York Fed. So we are one of 13 different institutions that make up the Federal Reserve System, or the central bank of the United States. As a central bank, we're a bank for banks and a bank or fiscal agent of the United States government. And you can see that we have the Board of Governors located in Washington, D.C., and then also the 12 Federal Reserve banks located throughout the country. The goals of this system, our mandate is to promote the health of the United States economy and the stability of the financial system. And each of these parts of the system work together in order to achieve that goal. You have the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., which provides sort of the overall oversight and participates in the policy direction for the system as a whole. And then the 12 different reserve banks located throughout the country are the operational implementation arm of the Federal Reserve System. Now, we have some common functions and some common responsibilities across these different reserve banks. We are all responsible for conducting research in different areas and the conditions of our districts, and you'll hear much more about that throughout the session today. We are also all responsible for circulating cash and coin throughout the nation, so making sure that banks and financial institutions have actual access to the cash that they and their customers need. And we are also all responsible for helping to supervise and regulate the financial institutions and banks within our 1 through 12 Federal Reserve districts. However, at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, at the New York Fed, we have some roles that are somewhat unique within the system as well. And I'll highlight a few of those, and you'll hear much more about how the work of research impacts and is very important to those different functions. So if you look at the Federal Reserve System, there are essentially three entities here. So briefly touched on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, which is a government agency located in Washington, D.C., the 12 different Federal Reserve banks throughout the country, and then these two elements come together to form the Federal Open Market Committee, which actually makes the monetary policy decisions that are the purview of the Federal Reserve System. Now, something to keep in mind is that this entire system is within the government, but has a degree of independence from it. Our goal is to work for and toward to promote the conditions for a healthy United States economy. It is a nonpartisan organization. And yet we have these 5 key functions that each of these different groups, each of the elements of the Federal Reserve System work toward. So the Federal Open Market Committee, which I mentioned, is the body that makes the decisions regarding the nation's monetary policy. And I promised to highlight what's unique about the New York Fed, sort of touching on in these different areas. And one thing just to know is that certainly we conduct a lot of research and have a lot of input into the nation's monetary policy. Also, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, John Williams, has a permanent seat on the Federal Open Market Committee. And that's a role that's played by whomever is president of the New York Fed at the time. So the New York Fed always has a permanent vote in terms of making decisions about interest rates. So with monetary policy, whether they'll go up, go down, or remain the same. So that's one unique element and one unique part that we play in setting that monetary policy. He is the vice chair of the Federal Open Market Committee. And then we are also responsible at the New York Fed for implementing those decisions. So once that decision is made, should interest rates go up, go down, remain the same, then an order comes to the New York Fed, and we are responsible for implementing that through our markets group. Then in terms of other responsibilities of the Federal Reserve System, certainly we are all responsible for promoting the stability of the financial system and helping to supervise and regulate financial institutions. And you'll find at the New York Fed, we have some of the largest, most complex financial institutions in the nation, sort of under our supervision responsibility. So that's another unique aspect of working at or with the New York Fed. Fostering payment and settlement system safety and efficiency. Fedwire is a responsibility of the New York Fed, and different payment systems, ensuring that funds are moving between financial institutions and available as consumers need them. And then finally, a responsibility of the New York Fed, and one that's I think near and dear to a lot of us, and particularly in the outreach and education group where I'm from, is promoting consumer protection and community development. So ensuring that we are conducting that research, that we are understanding different parts of the economy in order to fulfill that mission of creating a stronger economy for all segments of society in the United States. So somewhat of a quick overview, but I think hopefully a good initial introduction for anyone who is less familiar with the Federal Reserve System and the role that the New York Fed might play within it. But you'll hear so much more throughout the session in terms of the important work that the Research and Statistics group does in order to really inform all of these different functions, as well as needed to conduct good policy and really fulfill our mission. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for listening to me today, and wish you the best for the rest of the session here. And I'm going to advance to the next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you very much. So next we will have the Economist various sessions and panels. So the first we will have Daniel Mangram, who will talk about careers in economics and tips for success. Take it away, Daniel.
Thank you, Raji. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. As Raji mentioned, my name is Daniel Mangram. I'm actually a recent PhD graduate, and I joined the Research and Statistics group pretty recently in the bank last July. So as someone who has just recently went on the job market, I hope that I can provide some helpful insight on some potential careers in economics. Before we get started, I wanted to initiate a poll to get a sense of the audience that we have here today. So you should see some options that come up on how many economics courses have you taken. If you can go on and maybe answer this, and we'll kind of touch back on it a little bit later on in the talk. We'll talk about some of the results and kind of see what our audience looks like. So while you're voting for that, I want to start by talking a little bit about what is economics. So we have a nice definition here that comes from the American Economic Association. Economics can be defined in a lot of ways. So primarily, we're the study of scarcity. We study how people use resources and respond to incentives. The study of decision making. It often involves topics like wealth and finance, but there's a lot of other things that we study that aren't just about money. Economics is really a broad discipline. It helps us understand different historical trends, interpret today's headlines, and also to make predictions and policy prescriptions for the coming years. We also study things from as small as individual decisions in households, which tends to be microeconomics, and we also study the economy as a whole and macroeconomics. In brief, whatever there are people, economics is applicable, and we also span into other fields like sociology, climatology, and of course recently into epidemiology. So what are some of the topics that economics likes to work on? Some influential papers that have been discussed are some topics like why some countries are rich and others are poor. How might the quality of your neighborhood affect your earnings during your life? how international trade could affect political polarization. Many education topics, like some things that I study, are whether teachers affect students' non-cognitive skills. And in particular, with the recent COVID-19 pandemic, economists have been particularly focused on some of the economic impacts of the pandemic, including papers that have explored how the pandemic has disproportionately affected minority-owned businesses, and to what extent did college student travel during the spring break of 2020 contribute to COVID-19 spread. So as you can tell, economists explore a wide range of questions across many different fields. So next we can talk about some things that economists do. And as I mentioned before, primarily economists are focused on research. And that involves, finding interesting and unanswered questions. And in order to answer those, we collect data or we build a model that can try to help to answer that. This usually involves writing a paper and then publishing it, which helps to advance scientific knowledge. But additionally, on top of research, economists, and particularly those at the bank, are focused on policy advice. So a lot of the times that we'll use some existing literature from the research to try to answer a specific question in a timely manner that can be applicable to current conditions. So these include things like, should interest rates be increased or decreased? What could happen to different policies like the Affordable Care Act or from recently the CARES Act? And then lastly, a lot of economists are also professors, and we also focus on teaching and mentoring. So it's very important that we develop the future generations to be able to carry on the profession and to expand both technologically and in the topics that we're able to tackle. Increasingly, economics is focused on increasing the diversity in the field. So we're really focused on trying to increase the diversity of backgrounds and perspectives that are incorporated into the field of economics. Of course, this is careers in economics. We want to talk about, where do economists work? A lot of the people that are in school right now, your main people that you see in economics are those that work at universities. These are professors that their job is split between research and teaching. But there are a lot of economists that are also at government agencies and at the Fed, and their job is primarily research as well, but also instead of teaching, we focus a lot on policy advice. Additionally, you can work at places like think tanks, places like the Urban Institute, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, where have a lot of the same priorities as government agencies in the Fed, to where we work on prioritizing research and policy advice. Increasingly, private corporations are hiring many, many economists. So you can work in finance with Goldman Sachs, in technology at places like Microsoft or Amazon. And a lot of the times that's directed research to where you'll be kind of assigned projects that are part of the purview of the company and its priorities. And really, studying economics can lead to really nice careers. So these are typically salaries for economists are pretty comfortable in the six figures. And the AEA provides some really detailed, rich information on some earnings data for economists at kind of all levels of education. So now that we're at the tips for success, let's go back to some of these poll results so we can see kind of how many economics classes a lot of people have taken. And it seems like, for the 123 people that are in attendees, a lot of people have taken 4 or more classes. So that's good. We have a lot of economic knowledge, but there's others that are kind of earlier on their economics career. So just some tips for success in economics, both at the undergraduate and potentially at the graduate level and moving beyond. Economics is a very technical career and a very technical major that math is really helpful, especially if you're aiming for graduate work. Classes in calculus, linear algebra, probability, and statistics can be really helpful. And other classes can help you be really competitive for graduate admissions, like real analysis and measure theory. Also, programming is really becoming more and more important as economics is becoming more applied. Learning programming languages like Stata and R, MATLAB and Python can be really helpful to running statistical analyses. Another really nice tip to success is if you're in a university setting, you can talk to your economics professors at becoming a research assistant. Economics professors hire a lot of undergraduates and BA recipients to work as RAs on their research projects, and this can include coding up different analysis or cleaning data and just kind of helping be involved in the research process. That can help familiarize yourself with, what does research look like. Also, it's really helpful to apply for internships both while you're in college and then after college as well. Across the Federal Reserve System, at regional banks and at the board, we have a lot of internships that are available, but also there are other organizations and individual professors that hire RAs. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for you to kind of work as an RA to familiarize yourself with research and to gain the skills to be able to produce your own research. The AEA has a really nice summer program that is to help students to prepare for advanced economics and to teach course material that can help to become successful in the career. And this is particularly focused on advancing gender and racial minorities in economics. And then lastly, if you want to be an economist, especially a PhD economist, you should look at graduate school in economics. Typically, this is a PhD, but there are a lot of applied masters and masters in public policy that can use the tools that you've learned in economics to apply to public policy and to advanced statistical analyses. The AEA has put together a nice set of resources for aspiring economists that can help answer some more of these questions and see a little bit more detail on a lot of these positions that we've described. And of course, there's a lot of careers in economics at the Fed and within the Federal Reserve System. So one thing that we really pride ourselves at the bank is being able to help to prepare undergraduate students and post-undergrads to be able to be successful in careers in economics. So one of probably our biggest program for this is we run a 2-year RA program for people that have just recently graduated college or people that may be a little bit farther removed from college. And this is a program to where you can come to work at the bank and you help us to analyze policy and be involved in our research. And we also help you to be able to learn what goes into research and to help build the technical skills that are required to be successful in economics. You also receive really quality guidance and mentorship from the economists, and there's a really strong cohort bonding among RAs to be able to kind of share experiences and work off of one another. One of the nicest benefits is that you can take classes at local colleges and universities to maybe brush up on a few more math classes or economics courses so that you can make a better rounded application profile for graduate schools. And that's probably why about 2/3 of our RAs go to graduate school after economics. We feel that the program really helps to prepare potential applicants at graduate school. In addition to the RA program, we also have a 10-week junior and sophomore internships where students that are current students can come and work at the bank and over the summer and really learn what we do at the bank and start to be involved in research and importantly get a lot of guidance and mentorship from economists. And these interns typically become really competitive candidates to eventually join the RA program as well. And I believe that we have our first question and answer section on this section that I believe Raji is going to head. So it looks like Raji may have fallen off. So we will start with one of the pre-submitted questions, and we'll move on to some of the questions that may be in the Q&A or the chat box. So one of the pre-submitted questions that had come in says, I've had the opportunity to use and practice software packages such as Stata. What other software packages do you recommend becoming familiar with? So kind of to answer that, I would say that Stata and R are definitely the most common statistical packages, at least, that economists work with. There are relative benefits to each Stata and R mostly being that it's free and open source, but Stata tends to be the most preferred one. But expanding beyond that, new candidates are kind of brushing up technical skills outside of those, and really Python is becoming one of the more powerful and broadly applicable languages that can be helpful there. So I'd say probably broadening to Python, where you can do things like GIS and machine learning within that context can be really helpful. And if Raji's not back on yet, I can move on to the second submitted question. And that is, would you recommend as some courses or resources for students who aspire to understand mathematics for economics? And I would say we talked a little bit about some of the courses that can be helpful, especially if you're gearing up for graduate school. Those can be things like linear algebra and differential equations, or as high as real analysis. But along with resources outside of courses, there's some really good books out available to understanding mathematics and understanding kind of applied statistics and econometrics. I think kind of one of my most preferred books is either Mastering Metrics or Mostly Harmless Econometrics, that has been really helpful for understanding causal inference and statistical analysis. Also, Scott Cunningham has a nice book that has come out recently that's Causal Inference, the Mixtape, that's really nice. But there's I can add some others in the chat on some potential other resources that are available particularly for understanding in your coursework. And let me look and see.
So Daniel, it's Bev. I see one question in the chat. I'll just step in for Raji right now. When you say RA, are you talking about research assistant?
Yes, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. Yes, our RA program is research assistant. So they're assistant or research. So yes, thank you for that. And let's see, I'm pulling up the Q&A now to see if there are any other ones. Bev, did you see anything that was
I didn't, at least in where I can, oh, wait a minute, Q&A all 6. I didn't see, I was just looking in the chat.
Okay, so I see a question here from Justin that's good. He asks, when conducting policy research for the Fed and collecting data, how much support do you have for your data collection and surveys? And do you have the freedom to pick your own research topics, or are you signed an issue from higher up typically? That's a really good question as to how kind of work is delegated. In terms for myself as an economist in the research and statistics group, I kind of have an equal assignments between kind of policy work and research work, to where the research work I'm able to really have a lot of autonomy in choosing topics, and the policy work it's not as much delegated as it is what's topical and what is a priority. So what's really nice about the research and statistics groups at the New York Fed is that you really have a lot of autonomy to work on your research. I work on topics as differentiated as traffic congestion and student loans, and those are kind of topics I choose. And then in the policy sphere, that really depends on kind of what is most topical at the moment. So it's a really good question. Thank you, Justin. All right. And let's see. I think that next we're going to move on to Bev Hurdle. Is that correct, Bev?
Yes, that is right. Why don't we pass the ball? We can come back to some of those questions perhaps when we get to the panel. And I am now the presenter. Well, let me say a welcome to everybody on the call. I'm really happy to be here today. As Raji said when she introduced me at the beginning, my name is Bev Hurdle. I am the research director at the New York Fed, which means that I am responsible for managing all the work of all the economists and RAs at the New York Fed. I myself am an economist who spent all my career at the New York Fed. So I have a long experience of what it's like to work at the New York Fed. So let me take some of the general topics that Daniel was talking about and sort of say what things being an economist is like at the New York Fed. So what's it like? As Daniel has said, we focus on research and answering challenging questions. So, I should have said we have a poll that is going to start up, and I see Raji is back again. Good. A poll that is starting up with some questions that we will come back to that you can answer when while I talk. So our staff basically consists of PhD economists and BA level graduate research assistants, as Daniel talked about. And as Daniel said, a lot of the work that the economists do with assistance from the RAs is to do research papers that are intended to be published in academic journals. This is precisely what your professors are doing when they publish their research. And we, in fact, have pretty extensive contact with academic researchers at universities, both really in the New York area, but across the country and across the globe. In fact, economists come from all over the world to work at the New York Fed. We have economists from Europe and Asia and many other spots, as well as from the US on our staff. It's a very collegial atmosphere. The rhythms of the work are driven by the policy. So there's 8 FOMC meetings a year, and so we're engaged in, you know, preparing for those meetings or other events like the stress tests that the Fed runs that maybe have more an annual or a semi-annual cycle. But overall, you know, we work together in a very collaborative and supportive way. So what are the policy responsibilities? Daniel talked a lot about policy work. You know, what is that? Well, at the New York Fed, I think we think about it as falling into 2 general buckets. The first is sort of economic research. So this is, we have experts in the real economy. This work supports mostly the New York Fed's and the Federal Reserve's responsibilities in monetary policy. So we'll do things like forecasts of the US economy. We'll think about what monetary policy should be, how the system of monetary policy, the framework should be designed. We do monitoring of our district. If you think of that map that Heather showed you, the United States is divided up into 12 districts, and each Federal Reserve is responsible for a certain district. For the New York Fed, our district is the state of New York and a little bit of southwestern Connecticut and a little bit of northeastern New Jersey, as well as Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we track economic and labor market developments in our region. In addition, we not only zoom into our region, we zoom out to the globe because we need to understand what is happening in the major and emerging economies around the globe to understand fully what that impact will be on the U.S. Economy. And we look at things like household debt and consumer expectations for some surveys and data that we collect. On the other side, the other area of research, which is actually where my research has been on the financial side. So what you could think of as research on the financial economy, where we analyze banks and other financial institutions like insurance funds or money market mutual funds or hedge funds or private equity, SPACs, if you're things like that, if you're familiar with those. And financial markets and financial activities, because we are concerned with understanding any vulnerabilities to the stability of those financial markets, which play such a crucial role in our economy. And we get involved in lots of different activities, lots of different efforts to understand those risks. I can turn, let's see, I'll go to the next slide. Before I move on to the hot topics and research, let me look at the results of the poll. Because I think they're relevant to what I just talked about. So the first question asked, how many economists do we have? And the leading answer was more than 75. It's actually, the correct answer is C. We have about 65 to 70, depending on where we are. Economists, which makes us one of the biggest of the biggest actually of the 12 reserve banks. And if I go further down in what fields, most people correctly, we gave you macro, micro, inequality, behavioral, international, and the economics of climate, and most people correctly guessed all of the above is the correct answer. And then finally, and asking about what activities economists engage in. And again, nearly everybody who guessed all of the above, which is the correct answer for what economists do at the New York Fed. So to pivot back to the slides, what are some of the hot topics that we have covered in research recently? Well, as you might have guessed, COVID-19 went from 0 to 60 about this time last year as an area of our research. So we have spent a lot of time and effort understanding the effects of the pandemic on economic activity, the labor market, trade, consumer spending, basically any aspect of the economy that you can think of that has been impacted by the pandemic and its resulting policy, social distancing and other steps that have come about because of the pandemic. We thought about the implications for inflation, and right now, sort of turning our attention to the recovery and trying to answer the questions, what comes next? We have also devoted a lot of effort to the topics of inequality. Obviously, in light of many of the developments last May and more recently, it's important to us to understand the differential experiences in the economy by race, gender, income, education, and a lot of other cohorts. This is actually not a new topic for us. This is something that we have worked on for quite a while. We have, in fact, been publishing a series of pieces in our Liberty Street Economics blog, which if you have not had a chance to check it out, please check it out on our website. That's Liberty Street Economics. We've done, I think, 6 series looking at different dimensions of inequality related to the labor market, access to credit markets, education, housing, and the incidence of COVID-19. A third area that we have spent some time on, and we're increasing amount of time on, is the implications of climate for, again, basically every aspect of the economy: investment, productivity, lending, and risk to banks and the financial institutions. And what to me is the most exciting thing that we're doing is the intersections. So how does climate and inequality, overlap, and what's the intersectionality there? How about COVID-19 and inequality? These are, some of our most exciting and innovative work is being done. So Daniel also talked a little bit about our full-time program for research analysts. I won't go over this again in detail because he already talked about it. I would just point out that, somebody had asked, what are the things that we're looking for? I think we're looking for people who have an interest in economic policy issues, who have strong analytical ability, and some experience in large databases and statistical packages. And I just point out that this is really an ideal job for honing your analytical capabilities and for getting, real hands-on experience with policy relevant research. And then after the Fed, where do our RAs go? As Daniel already said, a large percentage of them go into programs for PhDs in economics, finance, or statistics. So this is just some of the schools that people have gone into. We also send people to law school and schools in public policy, as well as to nonprofit organizations, some of which are listed there. Some people go on to take other jobs in the Federal Reserve, and some people go on, into the private sector. So a lot of opportunities. A lot of opportunities for, terrific future work and education at the end of the 2 years with us. So with that, I think we are at the point of the program where we're going to move into the panel discussion. And so I am going to throw it back to Raji. Raji.
Thanks so much, Bev. So first of all, I should say I'm really very sorry. My computer completely crashed and I had to restart and come back again. I'm sorry I missed part of the discussion. Bev, there are actually a couple of questions for you. Maybe we can take those questions before we move on to the panel. So the first question is, what topics do economists work on that everyone may not realize they study?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think when people think about economics, often the go-to is that, well, you're studying GDP and unemployment and inflation. They think of macroeconomics. And the answer is yes, we, the profession in general, and we at the New York Fed do all of that. But there's a lot of areas of economics, as Daniel alluded to, that overlap with other disciplines and areas of interest. So economists will study topics like education, health and healthcare, immigration, criminal justice, and family dynamics, to name just a few. And there can be significant overlaps, with sociology, with political science, and then sort of on the other end of the spectrum, increasingly with data science and computer science, as economists take on and use as part of our toolkit artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and the tools that are being developed and applied in many other spheres. So I think, while the New York Fed doesn't do all of those fields of education, of those fields of inquiry, because we have a particular mission that we speak to, the profession in general, there's hardly a field or a range of questions that involve people and the decisions that they make that economists are not working on.
Thanks so much, Bev. There is actually one other question for you. We will take that and then we will move on to the panel. What is one surprising thing about economics that you think we should know?
Well, I think I probably already just said it, which is, how much overlap there is with, with other fields and in the breadth of questions that, that the profession works on and can contribute to, with the particular framework and method of analysis that economists can bring.
Thanks, Bev. With that, we will move on to the panel. So first of all, why don't we let our panelists introduce themselves briefly before we move on? Nina, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks, Raji. So my name is Nina Boyarchenko. I am a research officer in the capital markets function of the research group, and I've been at the bank for almost 10 years now.
Thanks,
I'm
Nina.
Jason Graham. I'm an officer in the regional area, focusing on the 2nd District, which includes Puerto Rico and New Jersey and New York. I've been at the bank for about 25 years.
Hi, I'm David Dam. I'm a 2nd-year research analyst, and I work in the macroeconomic and monetary studies function. And a lot of my research deals a lot with the labor markets, but it's also very interdisciplinary, and I've actually been able to work with other functions as well.
Hi, my name is Svetlana Galvez. I'm a 1st-year RA in financial intermediation. The topics that I cover tend to be very broad. I think Bev kind of commented on that before, but a lot of inequality, inequality all the way to like bank complexity work. So a wide variety.
And thanks to you all. Let's do a quick poll, and after that, we will move on to questions. We do have a lot of questions that have come in. We'll give 30 seconds for the poll, and then we'll look at the result and then move on to the questions.
Do we go into the questions, Raji?
Yeah, the poll results should come in very shortly. Yes, so there they are. So a lot of the attendees are still thinking, we can see, but there are a lot of the 38% of the attendees actually have decided that they would like to pursue a career related to economics, and that's really great to know. And I hope that the questions that will come up next will be helpful to you all, to all of you, even for the people who are still thinking. Hopefully this will give you some information that will help with your decisions. So a question that has come in is, what does a day-to-day life look for RAs and for economists? So how about the RAs take a first stab at it? Would David want to go ahead first?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Raji. So as a research analyst, I think a lot of our schedules are pretty similar, but it's slightly different depending on what type of time-dependent work we have. So For my case, I do have some policy work that requires submissions usually before noon or at least close to that as possible. So that would really structure my day, getting those tasks out of off the table first. And then an RA sometimes tasked on 1 to 2, maybe more projects, then that would be the rest of the day. So working on projects, submitting our results to economists for feedback, or even setting meetings. So a day can be pretty structured or it can be pretty free in terms of how one communicates with their boss and team.
Thanks, David. Would an economist like to, Svetlana, would you like to add to it?
Sure, I would pretty much mimic a lot of what David said. Policy work definitely comes first, but it comes in on a consistent basis, so you kind of know what to expect. All of my other research work is really dependent on what my economist is working with, so that could require a lot of coding or maybe a lot of reading. It's kind of dependent on their projects and what they need from me, but very similar to what David said.
Thanks, Svetlana. Would one of the economists would like to chime in about how the day-to-day life looks like?
Well, I guess I'll start. So I'm in the regional group. I would say I do more policy work than sort of deep research, but there is a lot of overlap. And I feel like a lot of the economists, consider research, like focusing on your research projects, more interesting than some of the policy work. But actually, a lot of the policy work that I do I find very, very interesting. And I look forward to coming to work or not coming to work, as the case may be, but working at home on most days. And I'll just to give you an example, a couple of the things that I've studied a lot are the impact of natural disasters on the economy. And these are things that arise out of responding to real world events. So we had the 9/11 attacks, we had Hurricane Sandy in Puerto Rico, we've had other, the COVID crisis, obviously. And the other area that I've been focusing a lot on is effects of the minimum wage. Again, we have sort of a natural experiment, and we've done a lot of research along the New York-Pennsylvania border, where you have pretty large disparities in minimum wage. So, my days are, there's a lot of thought and number crunching, but it's a pretty, yeah, I'll just end it there. Thanks.
Nina?
I don't really have anything to add, so.
Great, thanks. So there are a number of questions that have come in that are related to what qualifications are required to apply for an RA or an internship.
So maybe I can answer that like on a broader
Go ahead,
level. Sorry to interrupt you, Jason.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'll talk about it in more like of a broader approach in terms of like what you need to apply. That might be more of an HR, but like in terms of like what we're looking for, might be a similar question to kind of what they're asking. And from my experience, it's not just the econ classes and the math classes. I think that we try as best as possible to do a holistic approach to applications. So as long as we can see that you're interested in econ and you're pursuing that, I think that's a really good indicator to us. And so normally you might think, okay, the econ, the math classes, but also like, did you take finances classes? Did you do any like outside work with the clubs or organizations? Did you do research with a professor? Did you even have an on-campus, off-campus job? I think when we think about recruitment and a kind of candidate we're looking for, well-rounded is really important. So definitely econ oriented. We hope that if you're applying to the Fed, you're interested in economics in some way or the other. But maybe if you're worried that, I don't have enough econ or math courses, not to worry too much, as long as, there's obvious evidence that you are interested in the field. We are really trying to take a holistic and well-rounded approach to every applicant.
Yeah, I second obviously all that, and I'll just add a couple more minor things. Well, not minor things. Another thing we look for is just diversity of thought. So we like, to have people, not everyone just coming from a straight, stats economics background. And so even things like studying history, a lot of the wisdom we've had in dealing with the COVID crisis simply involves going back to 1918 and seeing what happened during the pandemic there. It's, it's not something that you can study in such a statistical sense because it's not like we have pandemics every few years. But, you can learn a lot from history and from psychology and other areas. Yeah, I just wanted to mainly add that.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Svetlana. So there is another question that asks, what software packages do you recommend becoming familiar with before applying for a research assistantship?
So I can start on that one. And Daniel already talked a little bit about this. But again, for us, it's really useful if you know a stats-oriented package, so something like a Stata or a SAS. And also an analytical-oriented package, so like an R, a MATLAB, or a Python.
Thanks, Nina. Let's kind of move on to more questions, and we can, at this point, we can open it up to the whole set of economists and RAs who can join in answering these questions. One question that has come in, I can see is, what do I do if I don't have any connections?
I'm gonna take a stab at that because I've often gotten emails out of the blue from people who are just interested, and I think there are a lot of economists, including myself at the New York Fed, that if you reach out to us, I mean, I guess there's some limits because if thousands of people start reaching out to us, it would be problematic. But I mean, one way to do it is to just try to reach out to people at the Fed, and a lot of people are very willing and interested and happy to spend 20-30 minutes with you answering questions, discussing things and such.
I can add a little bit to it. So I would say, in addition to what Jason said, look out for information and be proactive, like doing this webinar, for example. There are many such other webinars also being given, both by the New York Fed as well as a lot of banks in the system. The Board of Governors also does these webinars. Talk to your professor. If there is a career center in your college, go talk to the people in the career center. The other thing that I would also mention, that Daniel mentioned as well, is the AES Summer Training Program and Scholarship Program. That's a very helpful program and really gives you a wealth of information. So I would also encourage you to look into it.
And just let me wrap up by saying we look at all applications. You do not need to have a connection to apply to us. You do not need to have a connection to the New York Fed to get a job with us. We look at each and every application that comes in.
Thanks, Bev. So there are a number of questions that came in relating to diversity. So I'll combine them. I'll try to put them together. So this question has come up multiple times. How important is diversity in economics? And what can you do moving forward to promote diversity in economics? Well, I can take a first stab at this and then maybe others can add. So first, you have asked how important is diversity in economics? Diversity is critically important, really important in economics. Diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives, diverse ideas, diverse experiences make any research or any policy product considerably richer and considerably better. Well, as we know, unfortunately, economics is not a very diverse discipline. But here at the New York Fed, we very actively strive to increase diversity, to expand diversity in our incoming pool of RAs, of interns and economists, as well as we take this very seriously and we provide adequate resources and support to staff when they are here to help them succeed. Additionally, we disseminate information about careers and economics to a diverse group multiple times during the year. We hold multiple webinars and information sessions And I believe Tori is going to talk about this a little bit during her presentation after this as well. Any others want to add to this?
I can add something really brief. So from an RA perspective, there's a lot of events and like conversations around the issues around diversity. Diversity within economics is really nuanced. There's a lot of things behind that. But there is a voice and there is a conversation being held, especially recently developed. There is a DE&I council, so Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council created, and RAs are a part of that. There are 2 representatives, actually David Dam and I are both a part of that council. So there's an active work being done to address these things and create an environment where diversity can thrive. So this is something that's ongoing and continuing to this day.
Thanks, Svetlana. So one question I can see is, what would you say have been the challenges in work in the COVID regime? Would somebody like to take it?
I'm happy to start. So I think the challenges are probably very similar to people in other professions or in other places in their life. So of course, we've been working from home for more than a year now. So that comes with the usual set of issues. So technology, not being able to talk to your colleagues very easily on a day-to-day basis. And I guess what's particular to the Federal Reserve and other policy institutions is that, of course, our policy work changed dramatically last March, both in the amount of policy work, but also in terms of the topics we covered.
Yeah, and to add on to that from an RA's perspective, a lot of us, I think most of us, even the economists, really enjoy like working alongside other people when we were physically at the bank. So transitioning to online and not being able to physically interact with people and not seeing everyone's faces every day was quite a bit of a challenge for me as well, because at the bank, you get to speak to so many different people, not just in research. So you really get to learn so much about all aspects of the bank and everyone else. So that transition has been much more difficult, but it has also, I guess, opened up more windows of opportunity to really make an effort to reach out to people. I think, especially during the COVID times, a lot of people had to work with different people from different groups because of so many things that were going on and people were working in different responsibilities. So that kind of really created a more interconnected environment virtually, of course.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that may not have been, we probably would not have envisioned before, is that despite the fact that we're none of us are actually in the office, we have been actually very connected, very collaborative. We have done many joint projects, and it has been actually quite seamless. And we have learned a lot of things that potentially we can do better. We can learn a lot about technology, and we actually have done quite well, despite the fact that we really don't see each other face to face, and we don't sit in the same room to think about either policy or research. Regardless of that, we have achieved really a lot during this year, and all of that has been virtually, and we really have done quite well. Another question that has come in is, what do you recommend the candidates can do in order to stand out? Well, I can start this and maybe others can add on. So in an interview, I think if you show interest, that's actually really important and does make a difference. I think can make your application stand out is really show interest and show that you have given some serious thought to this job. Maybe ask questions about the institution. Maybe talk about some of the research, if you have looked earlier online about the economists or the professors where you are going to interview in. If you have looked at their profiles, maybe you can show that you have done your due diligence and ask some specific questions about their work or about their institution. That definitely does help. Sometimes if you have research experience, that's also really great, but it definitely is not something that you need to have. But in generally, showing interest, showing that you are motivated, showing that you care for this job really can make a difference.
Yeah, I second that. I'll just add that, if you stay on top of current events and just stay in touch with news, especially economic news, and let yourself be guided what truly interests you, because it's much more authentic. So if you're trying to force yourself to be interested in something that you think is important to the Fed, that probably won't be as effective as if you're genuinely interested in some topic, even if it may not seem to be directly related to monetary policy. That's my opinion.
And I'll just follow up. I often get asked, what can I, for advice by undergraduates, and the one piece of advice I always give, and Daniel actually mentioned this in his remarks, is talk to your professors. Your professors are your economics professors are actual practicing economists. They know what it's like to be in the profession. Go and ask them, do you have a research project I can help you with? The absolute worst thing they can say is no. And the best thing they can say is yes. And you might get some really, really interesting experience, which will make you a better candidate, not just for our job, but, for a lot of jobs that are out there.
And just to piggyback on what Bev just said, a lot of your econ professors really love their research and are not shy about talking about it. So if you're shy or think that you're taking up their time, a lot of them are usually pretty open to spending some time talking about the things that they're researching and they're passionate about. So you don't feel shy to reach out to them.
There is another question, which is, where do you get data about inequality topics? I can start talking about that, and then maybe others can add to it. So a unique thing about the New York Fed, the research group of the New York Fed, is that really unique data that we hold. We have a variety of data that is in-house, extremely rich data that actually lets us differentiate by different demographics, socioeconomics. So that's actually something that we use by race. We have a lot of survey data that actually lets us differentiate by race, by gender, by income. A lot of this data are actually online. If you're interested, you can look at some of this data. This is called, what I'm talking about now is called the Survey of Consumer Expectations. You can Google it and you can actually find it. We have other data as well, which are similarly individual level data, and does actually let us look at differences by income, by race, by gender. Apart from these data, we exploit a lot of publicly available data as well, which may be a slightly more aggregated, but we oftentimes get zip code level data, slightly higher county level data, which we use for inequality, looking at inequality of different things, health, education, labor market, consumer credit market, a lot of different things, economic activity. And one other way, if you're interested in inequality, is to look at, again, our website. We have, as Bev mentioned during her presentation, there is this economic inequality blog series that actually consistently continues to actually post blog posts on different topics. And each of these posts will talk about the specific data set that has been used in that post, and you can look at it. So just to say that really, this is a unique opportunity here at the New York Fed to access this very unique data, not just relating to inequality, but on a variety of other things. It's extremely data rich. I can say, at the New York Fed, the research group of the New York Fed. Okay,
I'll
so
just
next,
add one particular,
go ahead, Jason.
the consumer credit panel, which I'm not sure if you mentioned, is a huge data set of a very rich data set that has very detailed information on location of people, their credit scores, and other such things.
Indeed, yes. Another question that has come up is, will I be working in a team, or is it more independent work?
I can take a first attempt at this question. It really depends on the team. In terms of how my team is structured, we have 6 economists and 3 RAs split among those 6 economists. So sometimes projects are allocated to just one RA if it's just like a small project. Sometimes we're copied, all 3 of us are copied on a joint email, and that would kind of be our collaborative project. So at any given point, I'm probably working with at least 1 to 2 other RAs on my team, but I also have like an individual project that I'm working for a specific economist. It really varies from team to team.
I'll also just add to it's tangentially related, but one of the things that we try to do with especially second year RAs is do joint blog posts. So so that the RA is really a not just gathering data and things, but actually helping to write our blog posts. And so if you check out the Liberty Street Economic blog, I'm sure you'll find a lot of interesting things, and you'll see quite a few RAs listed there.
Also, to take another stab at this, although like sometimes I end up working on my individual economist work on my own, I think that one of the biggest resources for me personally is the RAs around me, and not even necessarily on my team. One of my good friends is on another team, and he's someone that I feel very comfortable pinging and saying, oh, my code isn't working, can you help me out with something? And they're always willing to, in a virtual environment, share screen and kind of work on that together. But you might work on a project individually, but your other cohort and your other colleagues end up being a huge resource in a lot of ways that save you a lot of time. So in that sense, it's also a bit of teamwork there.
Another question, do FRBNY or Fed Board RAs work on banking and regulation projects?
Yes. Yes, we have Svetlana is in that group. We have a group of economists who specialize in banking. I answered so definitively because that's what I did. That was my job before I became the research director at the New York Fed. So we have RAs and economists who work every year or twice a year now on the Federal Reserve stress test. We've had major projects looking at the impact of some of the regulations that were put in place following the 2007 to 2009 financial crisis. We have RAs who work on issues around banking competition and mergers and acquisitions. Svetlana, you probably could come up with a whole list of other things, but the general answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah, like Bev said, my team or my economist works very closely with supervision. And so we're in supervision does a lot of bank regulation in general. So there's a lot of work and a lot of different kinds of work to be done under that umbrella topic.
And I'll just add, because of the Community Reinvestment Act, the whole idea of bank supervision ties in to inequality. And so even in our regional group, there's we sort of indirectly do some of that.
So another question, what else besides education do you look for in your candidates?
So I think a number of people have already mentioned that. Again, we are very interested in the diversity of the candidates as well, and that's a very broad definition for us. And again, as a lot of people said, we do also look for a genuine interest in the broad field of economics, both because we think that will make you a better research associate, but also if you're actually interested in economics, you're going to enjoy the job a lot more than if you're just looking for a job and happen to become an RA.
Is it possible to be an RA at the New York Fed if I didn't major in economics?
Yes, we have math majors, we've had computer science majors. I think what's important is that you're interested in economics, but anyone else might want to chime in on that. But I would say that, yeah, the answer is very clear on that.
Another question, how necessary are internships to starting a career at FRBNY?
I mean, they're not necessary. So again, at least from hiring an RA perspective, we definitely wind up hiring both from the intern pool and from the pool of people that haven't done an internship as well. And that also definitely applies for the economist positions.
I mean, I'll just expand on that. Like, I think when you say career, I think you mean like longer term, because the RA is usually a 2 or maybe 3-year stint. But you know, a number of our RAs first will opt, instead of going to graduate school, may actually take a more long-term job in different areas like the markets group. We've had people go to the communications area, markets, supervision, and other areas within the Fed. And we've also had RAs who've gone on to grad school and then come back to the Fed. So we have economists who are actually former RAs. So I guess the answer to that is that, yeah, that is definitely a possible pathway. You know, people in other groups outside research really value what goes on in research, and so being an RA in research is a very sort of coveted thing within the Fed even, and within the whole Federal Reserve system. We've also had people who are RAs go on to take on jobs at the Federal Reserve Bank, San Francisco, Boston, and other areas.
Another question has come in. What kind of subjects are available at the Fed? I am an undergraduate and I have a particular interest in behavioral economics. Are there positions at New York Fed that would fit me?
Sorry,
So
I don't want to...
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Reggie.
I can start on it and then others can actually chime in. So I think as Bev mentioned during her presentation, we actually really look at a variety of subjects. Basically, anything that is in economics is looked at. And in fact, behavioral economics definitely is. So we have a lot of people in the microeconomics group, as well as in other parts of the research group, who focus on behavioral economics, studying questions relating to behavioral economics, writing surveys, on trying to understand those, modeling those, etc. So definitely, if you are interested in behavioral economics, there is a lot of work relating to behavioral economics that does go in the research group of the New York Fed. But in general, there really is a variety of topics that is kind of considered and studied. Definitely monetary and macroeconomics, and finance, but a lot of other things like health and immigration and education and consumer finance and expectations and climate. So there is really a lot of different topics that are covered, and most likely you will find something that is of interest to you. But the question is, yes, definitely there is work relating to behavioral economics that is going on at the Fed on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I don't really have much more to add except that a lot of my day and month and a lot of my work involves surveys and developing survey questions and finding ways to panelize survey data. So obviously behavioral economics is very, very relevant for surveys. And I think surveys, if anything, are going to become increasingly important as, technology improves.
Okay, so we maybe will take one more question. We do have multiple more questions that have come in, but we should move to the next part. But before that, final question for maybe a couple of people from the panel to take. Why did you choose to work at the Fed instead of the academia?
So I can start off on this. I just accepted my job at the Fed last February, so pretty recently made this decision. But I was considering academia versus the Fed, both. And I like the idea of academia, but a lot of the times with academic research, a project can go from start to publication in 5 to 6 to 7 years. And I really like the urgency with a lot of the policy work at the Fed, and the fact that you can really affect policy with the things that you do. So I'm part of my job is still to publish papers that may take 5 or 6 years, but you also get to do some quicker turnaround things for really timely policy relevant topics that you can kind of really get out quickly and try to affect policy. So that really was one of my main decision makers.
Thanks, Daniel. So with that, we will move on to the next part of the webinar. Tori Scarborough will talk about internships and full-time positions, diversity at the bank, and staying connected. Tori, take it away.
Thanks, Raji. So as Raji mentioned, my name is Tori Scarborough, and I'm a senior recruiter on our early careers team here at the New York Fed. I've been here almost 2 years. In August, and just really happy to present to you all today. I primarily work with our junior and graduate population, as well as the early careers, those who've been converted from internships, as well as those who might not have gone through the internship process, but are applying for their possibly their first or second job out of college or grad school for our early careers positions and opportunities. All right, so as you've heard throughout today's presentation, there are great reasons to join the New York Fed, and now I'd like to highlight some of those specific experiences that our interns have during the summer. Our internships are paid. Let me say that again, our internships are paid. And some of our New York Fed opportunities are either in both in New York and or Chicago. Our markets group has opportunities in both New York City as well as Chicago. As part of a world-class institution, the work our interns do is project-based with real-world impact. So during the summer, our interns have weekly training sessions to broaden their understanding of the essential functions of the bank. Additionally, summer interns have exposure to senior leaders and management from across the bank through our Scheduled Leaders Summer Series programs. Through their respective group, interns are paired with a mentor through our bank-wide mentorship program to help with relationship building. It also helps interns learn to navigate the important work they're doing, as well as exposes them to other people within their team as well as their group. I would like to also add that while last summer and this summer are virtual, we are proud to say that we were able to maintain the integrity, rigor, and substance of the internship program as it would have been if it were in person. All right, so I know there were some questions that came through about undergraduate opportunities for both internships as well as full-time, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those questions from a recruitment perspective now. And of course, you can ask questions once we complete this process, or this portion. So we have a number of opportunities for students who are working on their bachelor's degrees. First is our Freshman Discovery Day. Our Freshman Discovery Day is a pioneering educational outreach program designed to encourage freshmen from typically underrepresented backgrounds to learn more about the New York Fed. It is typically a one-day summit if it is in person, although last year and this year, we're holding the event virtually. It does take place every spring, and this year it will take place in April. Now, at Discovery Day, you will be provided an insider's view of the New York Fed's core mission and responsibilities, be exposed to some to former interns at the bank through a panel discussion, and you'll be set up with a toolkit to best position you for success in securing a competitive sophomore internship. Which brings me to the sophomore internships. This internship is an 8-week, typically from the second week of June to the end of July. As a sophomore intern, you will develop your technical skills through project-based work in a specific bank group aligned with one of 3 tracks: technology, business, or policy. You'll also engage in a rigorous soft skills curriculum led by our early careers team to help you develop your soft skills as you take on the corporate world. Next, we have the junior analyst internship. So this internship is slightly longer than the sophomore internship, that it is 10 weeks instead of 8. You'll work on some of the more advanced projects and start flexing some of those soft skills that you mastered, and culminating in an end of summer advanced interview process, AIP as we call it. The AIP program is an accelerated recruitment process for a full-time role at the bank, allowing you to secure an offer to return to the bank shortly after the internship ends. And you'll start that the following year once you finish your schoolwork. That leads us right into our full-time roles. There are a ton of different opportunities at the bank. Some roles are more traditional permanent hires, while others are cohort-based training programs. As you can tell, all of these programs pipeline into one another. However, getting involved early is not the only way to secure a role at the Fed. I think as mentioned in the prior panel discussion, that people can come throughout different parts of their career and different parts of the process. So whether it's through your freshman, sophomore discovery, freshman discovery day, or the sophomore career exploration program, all the way through the senior year or graduate program, or if you come in through the experience process, there are plenty of ways that you can look at joining the Federal Reserve Bank. All right, so let's look at the recruitment timeline for undergraduate opportunities. So we tend to recruit for internship roles about 8 to 12 months prior to the internship taking place. And we hope that the graphic above shows you a good view of when to start checking our website and getting your application materials ready. I do want to draw your attention to a couple of key deadlines now. We do have some full-time roles that are still open for the summer that are available now. If you are graduating senior, please check out our website at newyorkfed.org/careers. The majority of our full-time roles were filled in the fall, but sometimes from time to time, like now, we do have additional full-time roles that pop up, and we fill them throughout the year. So again, check out our website, newyorkfed.org/careers for more information about those openings. Now, when it comes to sophomore internship, that application will open up in mid-July, and the junior analyst internship will open up in late August. So please check back to our website for more opportunities and more information about that as well. All right, so requirements and qualifications. So I know that the panelists did speak more specifically for the research qualifications and requirements, that we're speaking a little bit more broadly with some of the schoolwork and things that you could bring to the table. But I do want to speak about the requirements and qualifications in general for all of the groups for the New York Fed. So this slide does provide an overview of where we are in the undergraduate recruitment process. We are currently preparing to welcome our 2021 summer intern class. As previously mentioned, we will open opportunities and applications for sophomores and juniors in mid-summer. So again, look at our website for those opportunities. Sophomore internships is 8 weeks, junior and graduate level interns are 10 weeks. So make sure that when you do apply that you are looking at all of the qualifications that are asked for the application process. They differ from group to group. So if you're not just doing research and you're applying to supervision or markets or legal or what have you, make sure that you look at all that they're asking for so that you make sure that you're submitting a complete application and that you do meet the minimum eligibility requirements for that application. Okay, there we go. interested in starting your career at the New York Fed. So let's talk a little bit about that. So before we get into the Q&A portion, we did want to highlight that our early careers team is now doing monthly insight webinars. And basically it's an overview of the bank. It gives you an opportunity to hear from various groups within the bank and the different programs for students. Now on the slide on your screen, you'll see the upcoming webinar dates and times. And you're welcome to register for as many webinars as you'd like throughout the year. And just to let you know, each month will probably cover similar topics from month to month, but it will get a little bit more specific as we get closer to the application timelines that I spoke about in the previous slides. You can register on our website, and you can like I said before, register for as many as you like. And as we get closer to those timelines, you might want to register to listen to those again and again. It'll be an overview of the bank and the groups and what we do. So with that said, we will move on to the Q&A. And on the screen, you'll see my colleagues and my manager from the early careers team. They will be working with you as well if you do decide to apply for the New York Fed and go through the recruitment process and applications. They are all wonderful individuals that we work with for the early careers team. Again, you'll see our email account. If there are any questions that you did not get an opportunity to ask during this webinar, please feel free to email us at ny.earlycareers@ny.frb.org. And we'll be glad to answer your questions as they come in. And lastly, you can follow us on social media that you see on your screen, and also go to our website to look at other opportunities and application timelines. So with that, I will turn it back over to Raji.
Thanks, Terry. So a question has come in which basically relates to what you just said. I'll ask it, maybe you can expand a little bit on it. So the question has come, which is, how can we be regularly informed about undergraduate job openings at the New York Fed?
So like I just said, on our social media page, we update that very frequently. And as well, you can go to our website, as often as you'd like. We do keep that up to date with what's coming up, with timelines, registration information, deadlines, and that kind of thing. So please go to our website as well as follow us on social media, and you can get updates regarding those there.
Thanks, Terry. Another question, what are the potential career paths at the New York Fed for undergraduate students who are not US citizens and for BIPOC students?
Yeah, so the first thing is we have opportunities across the bank for various, areas that you might be interested in. So as I mentioned before, there's of course the research group that presented today, but we also have other groups and opportunities within those groups that you can apply to. So I would highly recommend going to our website to look at those opportunities that we do have available for individuals across the bank that might suit your particular interests. Regarding US, you can email us at the website, at the email address that I just mentioned, because that will be a case by case, but primarily it is for protected individuals as defined by the US federal immigration law for US citizens, US nationals, and permanent residents. So that would be for the US citizen question. And of course, if you have other questions regarding that, you can of course email us and we can look into that case by case.
Thank you. Maybe there is time for one other question. So the question that has come in is, what opportunities can a rising sophomore pursue at the New York Fed?
Right, so like I mentioned earlier, the Freshman Discovery Day, and I'll go back to that slide, which happens every spring. That is an opportunity to learn more about the Sophomore Career Exploration Program, but also we do have Sophomore Internship opportunities in the summer. We just had our inaugural class the summer of 2020, and we're having our second class this year. So you would need to just make sure that you're going to our website in the middle of the summer, I think mid-July, is when applications open, and you can apply for the Sophomore Summer 2022 internship opportunities.
Okay, so I think we have about 2 minutes left. There's one question just came in. I'll ask you, what are the odds of, and this is going to be the final question, what are the odds of getting a job at the Federal Reserve with a BA degree if I did not participate in the Fed's pipeline program? Can I still get a job?
Yeah, so I think that was answered earlier with the panelists, but there are opportunities outside of the pipeline traditional internship program in the fall and throughout the year, quite honestly. You just need to continue to check on our website because there will be opportunities at the end of summer when the internship class concludes and we still have some openings for full-time in different groups. But then also throughout the year, there are from time to time, there will be postings for other opportunities that open up for people that have just graduated from either grad school or undergrad. So I would highly recommend one that you continue to come to our Insight webinars that are monthly because we will be sharing information during that, as well as check our website and come to our social media, follow our social media page, and we will, give you updated information regarding timeline, program, deadlines, and that kind of thing. So you'll know when applications become available for both internships as well as opportunities.
Thank you so much, Tori, and thank you so much to all for participating, and thanks to the attendees for attending. As Tori said, if you have questions, please email us at the email that you see, and also there is another email you will actually see when you registered, as well as the email that you got after you registered. There is a contact email. Please email us if you have questions. And so that concludes our webinar. I will actually remind you that there is a poll that you will see as you exit this website. We definitely very much encourage you to please take that survey. It shouldn't take you more than 3 to 4 minutes of your time, and definitely let us know if you have questions at any point. Thanks. Bye. Have a good day, everyone.